Patients. We also online here this evening, so we have a virtual audience, and also we want to make sure that this event is accessible to all. So again, I appreciate your patience with us while we got started. My name is Mary Schlitt. I'm the Associate Director of the Barger Leadership Institute, and I just want to thank you for coming out this evening and supporting our very special guests in this topic. I also want to thank our very important sponsors, the Nam Center for Korean Studies, Michigan Community Scholars Program, Center for Japanese Studies, the University of Michigan Museum of Art, our beautiful setting this evening. There's a great exhibition upstairs if you haven't seen it. I believe it's an anti-war exhibition. The Center for Global and Intercultural Study, Organizational Studies, and of course, the University of Michigan Department of Psychology. It's my pleasure to introduce to you tonight our moderator, who's going to kick things off, Dr. Connie Tingson-Gattus. Dr. Tingson-Gattus is the Associate Vice President for Student Life at the University of Michigan. She leads a dynamic portfolio of 8 units dedicated to holistic student development, inclusive learning, and social change education. Renowned for her leadership in higher education for more than 30 years, she is presently championing the university's initiative to advance religious, secular, and spiritual life. Work that strengthens a culture of mindfulness, compassion, and interfaith collaboration on campus. Through innovative programming, exceptional service, and a steadfast dedication to equity and inclusion, she is pioneering breakthroughs for diverse leaders in education. Her transformative work inspires individuals to lead with purpose and peace and empowers the next generation of changemakers who I see in this audience tonight, this evening. She's been recognized by community-based organizations and professional associations for her excellence in education, community service, and breaking the glass ceiling. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Connie Tingson-Gattus to the stage.
Thank you. And good evening. It actually is evening now, and we wouldn't know it at this level, but I think it's really heartwarming for us to be together. It really is an honor to moderate this particular symposium around cultivating mindful peace leadership. I have a few minutes. I was invited in addition to moderating this incredible panel that I'll be introducing you to. But really, we had a chance to share some thoughts in my administrative role around this topic. And so if you will permit me, I will share some thoughts that I put together and not off the top of my head. I really don't take this lightly when I think about this invitation, because right now, time is one of the most precious resources we have, and it doesn't come back. And the fact that you chose to be here with us today speaks volumes, especially in an era where division can really be loud and constant. Choosing together as a community to think seriously about peace is not only timely, but it's brave. It's also deeply aligned with what universities are meant to do at their best. Create space for inquiry, accountability, imagination, and human dignity. Tonight, we're especially fortunate to have these panelists whose work helps us move beyond peace as an abstract ideal, but also towards peace as a practice leadership discipline that we can learn, strengthen, and apply. I want to begin, if you will permit me, with a grounding moment, and maybe you do this often, but I literally would hope you'll join me, is just taking one moment that peace is not just a theme, but it is a way of being. So if you'll permit me, just take one deep breath in. And then exhale it. And maybe one more to take it all in. Because I really believe as we exhale that, performing calmness is a reminder to ourselves, right? Around the quality of how we spend our attention. And however you got here, whether you came from a meeting, came across town, came from another state, there's many things that consume us and distract us. And I think representing this idea of calm and being focused really helps ground us. Peace leadership begins with how we show up, both internally, and then it eventually becomes an external expression. So in my current role, as was described, I have the privilege and responsibility to help shape the conditions, and I emphasize the conditions where students live, where they learn in and outside of the classroom, as well as where they lead. It includes supporting spaces for belonging and dialogue, guiding responses when conflict arises, strengthening cross-campus partnerships that advance community and civic engagement. Over the years, while working in student life, whether I was designing leadership programs or teaching in higher education or coordinating efforts that many voices could move together in the same direction, I learned something that sounds very simple but is very hard to live. Peace is more of a process built over time than one instance. Or as I often say, hopefully you don't judge me by one data point, but over the time, multiple times of how you interact with me, not just at one time. More often, it's a sustained practice of choosing over and over, listening carefully, acting with dignity, to hold complexity without dehumanizing another, to build systems to make those choices more possible for more people. That word systems, it brings peace. It's not just personal, but it's also structural. When I think back of the years working on campus, sitting in teams across not only student affairs and student life, but in academic leadership, also thinking about safety and security, mission integration, retention, behavioral intervention, and ultimately student support to help them. I'm reminded that conflict doesn't usually arrive in sometimes the most dramatic of headlines. Just pick a topic. It often arrives as a pattern. Sometimes it's the student who's falling through the cracks, the community member who doesn't feel safe and is asking for help, a policy that is technically fair but is experienced profoundly as unequal, a moment where we treat someone as a problem to manage rather than a person to understand. And in those moments, peace leadership is not soft, or as other people like to call fluff. It's not passive. It's not actually just, can we all just get along? It's not even perfect harmony, as some people like to describe. Peace leadership is about values and bravery, living values with bravery or courage, paired with steady, intentional action over time. That brings me to this first purpose of our symposium, which is expanding how we define peace. And I'm excited to hear our panelists really speak to their expertise. For some, peace is the absence of violence, the ending of war, the prevention of harm. For others, peace is the presence of justice, conditions that allow people to be safe, fed, sometimes housed, respected, feeling free to learn and thrive. And I'd also add that for many students and many of us, peace is also the experience of being able to exhale, to exist in a space where you don't have to constantly calculate whether you will be misunderstood, minimized, treated as disposable. And sometimes it's the culmination of microaggressions over time that ultimately put people on edge. But thinking about exhaling, what does it mean to exhale? So peace can also be external and interpersonal. How we navigate tension in the classroom, if you live on campus in the residence halls, sometimes it's labs, sometimes it's our workplaces. I've seen how quickly a community can fracture when people feel unheard, and how quickly it can begin to heal when someone with authority chooses to say, I want to understand the impact, not just the intent. Sometimes peace begins with a single sentence that creates room for truth without fear of retaliation. Peace can be institutional. How our policies, resource decisions, power dynamics either reduce harm or reproduce it. In higher education, we like to believe our good intentions are enough. The reality is peace requires more than intention. It requires design. We're prompted to ask, Who's protected by this policy? Who's burdened by it? Who benefits from the status quo? Who pays for it emotionally, academically, and even financially? And peace can be deeply internal, which is where we started. The practice of mindfulness that helps us respond rather than react, especially under stress. And I can tell you many a moment where the emotion can sweep us up under stress. If you've ever been in a difficult meeting, and I can stand in that line a few times, managing a crisis or mediating a conflict where every word feels like it could escalate in any given moment. You know this. Leadership is a practice of staying grounded so our stress doesn't spill onto people around us. Or another way to put it, good leadership means containing our own fear instead of spreading fear. Or even more, leadership is learning to respond calmly, and it's taken years and it's still a work in progress. So that anxiety isn't something that we set in the tone in the room. Easier said than done. Mindfulness doesn't erase disagreement. It actually helps us stay human inside. And tonight's theme asks us to consider peace through this lens of Hiroshima, and that lens really matters. We're reminded from the film last night and from our conversation of the consequences when dehumanization becomes normalized, when fear embedded into governance, when technological power advances faster than ethical judgment. It reminds us that catastrophe is not only the result of one decision, but can be the culmination of many smaller decisions. Choices that narrow empathy, they normalize harm, they make the unthinkable feel inevitable. But Hiroshima also reminds us of something equally important: how remembrance, testimony, and sustained advocacy carry forward across generations, and how people and communities transform profound loss into lasting resolve to prevent future harm. Many of you may have joined us for the screening, The Vow of Hiroshima, the documentary centered on Setsuko Thurlow's life and work. Her story offers that powerful lesson. Peace is not merely a feeling, but it's a commitment. And that's why peace leadership isn't only about being agreeable, it's about the courage to keep returning to our core values, especially when the easiest option is to disengage, to stereotype, to harden, to reduce human beings into groups, categories. And that's our second question, which is, how do we teach peace in higher education? Universities are training grounds for leadership, whether we admit it or not. We can unintentionally train the opposite of peace: certainty without humility, debate without care, excellence without compassion, leadership without reflection. The reality is some academic cultures do reward being sharp more than being wise. They reward winning the argument more than learning about the person. They think about, if we think about how we want students to lead in ways that reduce the harm and expand dignity and create solutions, peace really can't be optional. It can't be an add-on or an afterthought. It really has to be part. And I know there are many faculty who believe wholeheartedly the integration into the curriculum of what we value. Teaching peace asks us to do some of these things: teach skills, conflict engagement, ethical reasoning, intercultural competence, restorative justice practices, capacity to collaborate across difference. It also teaches us habits of mind, curiosity, self-awareness, the ability to sit with discomfort when shutting down. One of the most important leadership moves I've ever learned is learning to notice the moment when I'm getting defensive and choosing a different response, or AKA park it, compartmentalize. Not because I'm weak, not because my kindness is viewed as a weakness, but committed to the outcomes that require trust. it also requires us to teach structures, how to design learning environments where dignity is not just optional, but it's a voice and accountability to coexist. Where we belong is not something students must earn, but it's something that we need to make as an expectation, automatic. I want to pause. Becoming smaller, what does it mean? Students oftentimes arrive on campus carrying the message that they must shrink part of themselves to succeed. Peace leadership education pushes against that. It says we build communities where you do not have to disappear in order to belong. This symposium can inspire us, and inspiration right now matters in so many ways. Without practice, it fades. So to name a practical reality, peace leadership shows in oftentimes the most unglamorous ways. It shows up when a student is harmed and we respond with care and due process. It shows up when a community is grieving and we resist the urge to rush back to the normal. It shows up when colleagues disagree and we choose not to recruit others into sides. It shows up when we realize that we've caused harm and we apologize without conditions. It shows up when we use our influence quietly, consistently to build policies that are humane and not just efficient. That kind of leadership isn't just a show. Hopefully, it's grounded in discipline. So, as we listen tonight, including myself, I'm holding these three questions that are transformative to live. What kind of peace are we talking about? Who gets to define it? Because peace often is defined by the powerful, often asks the marginalized to stay quiet. True peace makes room for truth. Second question, what does mindful leadership look like when peace is not the easy path, but the necessary one? When speaking carefully is harder than speaking quickly? When staying in a relationship is harder than being right? Third question, what would it mean for our classrooms, our campus community, our co-curricular programs, our institutions to treat peace as an essential learning outcome, not just as a slogan, but as a measurable practice, reflected in how we teach, how we assess, how we allocate resources, and how we respond when things are going wrong? So before we begin, I want to mention one more thing. Any students in the room? Okay, I heard that earlier. Sometimes peace education can feel overwhelming because problems are so large. Weapons of destruction, war, displacement, injustice, polarization. But the lesson that we hear from Hiroshima and from peace activists across generations is not to carry everything. In other words, do what's yours to do. Own what's yours to own. With clarity and courage, but do it alongside others. Don't go alone in it. Peace leadership is not perfection, it's persistence over time. Our format this evening is straightforward. Each panelist is going to offer remarks for about 20 minutes, followed by a Q&A with attendees. And in addition to these ideas, start to think about what questions you may have. We can carry forward a question, a conversation, a policy, things that we can think about, not just can think about, but actually apply after this session. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce our first panelist. Our first panelist is Michi Takeuchi. Let me say that again. Takeuchi, did I do that right? Sometimes you have to slow yourself down. A longtime New York City resident who grew up in Hiroshima, is the granddaughter of Dr. Ken Takeuchi, founding director of the Hiroshima Red Cross Hospital, and a survivor of the August 6, 1945 atomic bombing. As a teenager, she volunteered at the World Friendship Center and contributed to a translation project that helped lead to Unforgettable Fire, drawings by atomic bomb survivors. She later formed a close, ongoing relationship, engagement with Hibakusha activist Setsuko Thurlow and created and produced The Vow of Hiroshima, a documentary following Thurlow's life and leadership in the global movement to abolish nuclear weapons. Please join me in welcoming her.
Well, thank you so much for your kind introduction, Dr. Timson Gattus. And good evening, everyone. And it is my pleasure to be here with you today, to be a part of this symposium, Lessons from Hiroshima. Thank you. I'd like to thank Dr. Rana Mahalingam and Barger Institute of Leadership for making it possible to screen The Vow from Hiroshima. I hope some of you had a chance to see the film at the beautiful State Theater yesterday. Today, I'd like to share with you the journey on how and why I came to make this film and the experiences that shaped the path. I was born in Japan and grew up in Hiroshima. I came to the United States in the 1970s because I wanted to study psychology. At that time, the world felt like a very different place from now. Since then, I have spent most of my adult life here in the United States. Right before entering college, I had an experience that deeply influenced me. It was a film, Clute, released in the early 1970s, starring Jane Fonda. You may know her not only as an Academy Award actor, but also as someone who continues, even now, in her 80s, to speak out for climate action and social justice. The film is set in New York City. There is a scene where her character speaks regularly with a professional woman about her struggle, her fears, her work, her sense of control, and vulnerability. At first, I did not understand who this professional woman was, but I was very intrigued. As a teenager, I went to see the film 7 times in the movie theater. There was no Netflix at that time then, trying to understand who this woman was. Eventually, I learned that was psychotherapy sessions. I was mesmerized by it. In Japan at that time, seeing a psychotherapist was not a part of everyday life. I had never even heard of such profession. That discovery opened a completely new world for me. It made me realize something very simple. We only know what we know, and we don't know what we don't know. And that was the experience that led me to want to come to the United States to study psychology. For me, this was the power of film. It can open a door to a world we did not even existed. That experience would stay with me for a long time. After graduating from high school in Hiroshima, I did come to the United States to study psychology. After college, I chose to stay in New York, and I began working at a Japanese advertising agency. What began at an entry-level position gradually led me in different directions. Over time, I created a consulting firm consulting firm connecting the United States and Japan, supporting companies working across cultures. Studying psychology became very handy in my work life. I was living a full, active, professional, focused life in New York City. It became an exciting and meaningful path, one that I originally did not plan. And then, quite unexpectedly, I encountered a community that would change the direction of my life. In 2012, I encountered a NPO, Youth Arts New York, and its program, Hibakusha Stories. This is how it happened. One day, I received a phone call from a friend who said her neighbor was urgently looking for a pinch-hitting Japanese English interpreter for the next day. It was a Friday evening, and they needed someone for Saturday afternoon. It felt very urgent, so I said yes and went to Brooklyn. That was how I met the Hibakusha Stories program that invites survivors of the atomic bombings from Hiroshima and Nagasaki to speak directly with high school and college students in New York City. That day, they were holding an orientation program with survivors, educators, and organizers. I was stunned to discover that such a program existed in New York. I had no idea. During the introduction, I shared that I was also from Hiroshima and that my grandfather and my mother were Hibakusha. I mentioned that my grandfather had been the director of the Hiroshima Red Cross Hospital at the time of the bombing, as if these were simply coincidences in my life. I still remember Catherine Sullivan, the organizer and educator who is with us today. She said, "This is not by accident. This is destiny. Welcome to Hibakusha Stories, Michi." Looking back, I realized that day marked a turning point. It was the beginning of a third act in my life. Now, I like to speak about Setsuko Soro, the protagonist of my film, The Vow from Hiroshima. It was through Hibakusha Stories I met Setsuko Soro. She was at the heart of this program. She has devoted her life to sharing her experience of surviving the atomic bombing at the age of 13 to advocating for the abolition of nuclear weapons. Even in her mid-80s, she continued to travel around the world, speaking to students, diplomats, activists, and ordinary citizens. Her words reached people across countries and generations. But I could also see that this work came at a cost to her. The years of traveling and testimony were taking a physical toll. I began to feel that a documentary film could help preserve and share her message for those who might never have the opportunity to meet her in person. In a way, it brought me back to that early experience in my life, realizing how film can reveal a world we do not even know existed. I hope that my film could do the same. That is how The Vow from Hiroshima began. Audience responses have been deeply encouraging. Many have told us that for the first time, they began to understand what really happened beneath that mushroom cloud, through the telling of personal human stories. While making the film, Setsuko encouraged me to learn more about my grandfather's experience. My grandfather had passed away many decades ago, and I never knew him very well. I had lived in New York for most of my adult life. Because of that distance, both in time and space, it was not easy to uncover the details of his life during that period. I often found myself wishing that I had asked my mother more questions and that I had begun this search much earlier. For me, Hiroshima is not an historical event. It is the story of my own life, of my family. My grandfather, Dr. Ken Takeuchi, and my mother, his daughter, Takako, both survived the atomic bombing. At that time, my grandfather, a surgeon and medical professor, was the director of Hiroshima Red Cross Hospital. He was inside the hospital when the bomb exploded. He suffered 7 broken bones, yet continued to lead the medical staff through those unimaginable days and in the years of rebuilding that followed. 2 days after the bombing, my mother, who was 18 years old, entered the devastated city to search for him. She found him severely injured in the hospital. She decided to stay to take care of him for several days, exposing herself to a massive amount of radiation. Later, my grandfather asked her never to tell anyone that she had been at the hospital so soon after the bombing. Out of respect and out of fear of being stigmatized, she remained silent for many years. Most survivors carry their suffering in silence. Even though this is my family's story, I hesitated for a long time to speak about it. No one in my family shared what happened to them, so I did not grow up hearing these stories. And it was not my own experience. I also felt unsure about breaking the silence my family had kept. But one day, when I shared my reluctance with a close friend, she said to me, "Michi, it may not be your own story, but it is everybody's story. And the use of nuclear weapons should never be repeated." That moment clarified something inside me. It was another important turning point. So when I completed the vow from Hiroshima, I thought my responsibility to carry the story forward was finished. But then, in the spring of 2022, something unexpected happened. While emptying out my parents' home in Japan after their passing, I discovered my grandfather's old black notebook. It was his working journal from the hospital, beginning just after August 6, 1945, when the atomic bomb exploded. The pages were faint, written in pencil, but I immediately knew they were precious. They were his first record of those earlier days of chaos and devastation. I shared the notebook with a producer from NHK, the Japanese national broadcaster, and his team helped bring these records to light through a documentary program, Hiroshima Red Cross Hospital Tower of Life. What emerged was a vivid picture of the hospital in the immediate aftermath of the bombing. It was only of the few buildings, it was one of the only few buildings still standing, and thousands of injured and dying people came seeking for help. But inside, everything was destroyed. There were almost no supplies, and many doctors and nurses themselves were injured. My grandfather was among them, but even with his severe injuries, he continued to lead the remaining staff as they worked around the clock to care for the survivors. With the support from the International Committee of the Red Cross, medical supplies finally began to arrive. These doctors and nurses became, in a sense, the first in history to treat victims of a nuclear weapon and its radiation with no precedent, only compassion and resilience. Learning all of this through my grandfather's notebook changed something in me. It allowed me to understand him more personally and finally to grieve for him. It also helped me understand why Hibakusha and their families carried such a strong sense of responsibility, the conviction that what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki must never happen again. Also, in his notebook, I found passages from the Old Testament. He had grown up in a devout Christian Protestant family, and I came to feel that it was his faith that sustained him through those unimaginable dark days. It gave him a quiet sense of hope, even in the midst of devastation. This understanding deepened my own sense of responsibility to remember and face what happened to my family, to speak about it, and continue to carry it forward. By sharing the vow from Hiroshima, Setsuko's life story, and the message behind the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, TPNW, hope to inform, to open dialogue, and to inspire action toward the elimination of nuclear weapons. I have come to think of this work as a way of waging peace, not as something passive, but as something mindful we must actively and intentionally practice with care, persistence, and commitment. As a next step, I am exploring new ways to share these messages with younger generations so that this issue and its meaning can continue to live on. In many ways, I feel I have come full circle, once again reminded of the power of bringing these experiences to others and of our shared responsibility to shape a future free from the shadow of nuclear weapons. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we will have Dr. Kathleen Sullivan, who has worked on nuclear disarmament education for more than 35 years, with a focus on young people, Hibakusha, I'm pronouncing it differently as I heard you, and communities impacted by radioactive harm. She is co-chair of the Nuclear Truth Project and for the past 15 years has directed Hibakusha Stories, an arts-based initiative that has brought survivor testimony to more than 40,000 youth, and supported Hibakusha participation in conferences and UN forums. She's been appointed to Nuclear Guardian Fellow at the Johanna Macy Center at Naropa University and serves in New York City's Nuclear Weapon Free Zone Advisory Committee. Please join us.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Michi. It's just such an honor to be here with you, who's not only my colleague, but a dear, dear friend. I'd like to thank Ram for his warm welcome. It was so wonderful to be at the State Theater with so many last night. But before we begin, I would just like to, as we are an intentional community together, just take a moment of silence to remember all who are suffering in our world today from the perils of violence and war, the uncertainty that we find ourselves in. Children in Iran, children in Gaza and Israel, children in the detention center in Dilley, Texas. Let's just take a moment to bring them into our awareness and to bring that awareness to ourselves as we go forward with this evening's presentation. Thank you. And I'd like to dedicate the merit of our time together to the liberation of all of us humans and all beings. May all beings be safe. May all beings be happy. So I am going to use this clicker. Hello? Oh, great. Okay, great. So this evening, I'm going to take some time to show some photos, tell some stories, and to the theme is to make the invisible visible and talk about the journey that Michi talked about earlier. So let's see. Yes, okay. This is when it all started. This is the Trinity test in New Mexico. This is where we get the phrase ground zero, because within that first nuclear explosion, we had something that wrecked life in less than a second, what we called zero time. And as our friend Tina Cordova of the Tularosa Downwinders in that region in New Mexico reminds us, the first casualties of the nuclear weapon experiment were New Mexican babies. This is a photograph by Ulrich Mertens. He's a German photographer. And this is what happened when he exposed photographic film to uranium ore. This is from his series called Strahlen, which means shining. So what we cannot see can hurt us. And in the case of radiation, we can only find the effects, we can only feel those once they turn up as an effect, as an illness. This is a photograph by Robert Del Tredici, who took this photograph of the tissue of a lung tissue where you can see alpha radiation. So this is without scientific measuring instruments. Radiation is only known to our cells, and we recognize it only when it shows up as a symptom or a disease. So again, this is a way of trying to tell the story and make the invisible visible. This is another photograph by Bob Del Tredici, which is the hand of Richard Rhodes. That name's probably familiar to many of you. He's an atomic historian, and he's holding a glass ball. That glass ball is the size of the amount of plutonium that was used to destroy the city of Nagasaki. So that small glass ball is the size of the plutonium used to destroy Nagasaki. And here we have a U.S. Army aerial view of Nagasaki before August 9th, 1945. And here is a view of Nagasaki after the atomic bombing. Before, after. Within less than a second, buildings were on fire, firestorms were occurring. The mushroom cloud, which we think of in the abstract, is people, buildings, loved ones, trees, stones, flowers, pulverized into a cloud. This is a photograph by Peter Goen. It is a photograph of coconuts on a beach at the Bikini Atoll. This year, we mark 80 years since the US government started nuclear atmospheric testing in the Marshall Islands. And still to this day, the Bikini Atoll is too contaminated to live in. 80 years ago, the US government asked the Bikinians to move, quote, for the good of mankind. They are still not able to inhabit their homelands. And this, far from being just what looks like a waste of resources, is truly the death of the island culture, the brutalization of indigenous peoples, who, for them, the coconut was a huge part of their culture, not only in nourishment, but also in building materials. This year also marks the 40th anniversary of the Chernobyl nuclear power accident on April 26th, 1986. This is the town of Pripyat. That was the town, that workers' town that was built for the Chernobyl workers. And that saying is, let the atom be a worker, not a soldier. Let the atom be a worker, not a soldier. This is leaning into the false premise that there's ever been such a thing as the, quote, peaceful atom. Pripyat still stands as a ghost town 40 years from now. At that time, people were removed from their homes and were instructed to throw all of their belongings out of their window. So this is an apartment block where you can see people's clothes. I imagine photographs, baby toys, love letters that were thrown out of the windows so that they could be buried in trenches, shallow trenches. These photographs were taken by Yuri Kosin, who is a photographer who also worked for a stint at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Again, another place which is not inhabited by people because the exposure to radiation is still so extreme. So I'd like to shift now to the idea of storytelling as unearthing the past. And here we move to Hibakusha stories, what Michi spoke about earlier. This was our main work, was to bring Hibakusha into direct communication with young students. This is our friend Kim Jung-lee from Lee-san from Hiroshima. He was a Korean Hibakusha. So not only was he able to share with students what happened on August 6, 1945 in Hiroshima, but he also was able to to share the experience of discrimination that he felt and racism against Korean people. So this was very potent messaging for our young students. Here's Shigeko Sasomori. She was another main player for our beautiful project, which lasted over 10 years. Shigeko was also a Hiroshima survivor and one of the Hiroshima maidens, 25 young women who were brought to the United States and had reconstructive plastic surgery at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City. And here, of course, is Setsuko. If you look at the students' faces, just look at how they are interacting with our friends who shared their stories, and the students really could learn from their authenticity. We also are blessed with Michi Takeuchi and Miyako Taguchi. Michi, as you know, being from Hiroshima, Miyako from Nagasaki. They're both second-generation Hibakusha who've also been really important teachers for our program. And they're standing here with Setsuko and Yasuaki Yamashita, who is from Nagasaki. I just like to uplift the story of Nagasaki because I think that it often gets sort of forgotten. Hiroshima was the first, but Nagasaki was strategically far more important in terms of militarism because it was the plutonium bomb, which would later be the focus of US nuclear weapons from a hydrogen weapon point of view. We also worked at the UN. We brought Hibakusha to work with diplomats, work with decision makers. Here's Setsuko speaking at a reception that we hosted with the Japanese government and the UN Office for Disarmament Affairs during the Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty Review Conference in 2015. Here's Yasuaki, who is briefing the UN guides that the UN has a disarmament exhibition, which obviously has a portion dedicated to Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And through our project, we were able to bring the Hibakusha in to brief the UN guides so that they could give a more detailed account of Hiroshima and Nagasaki on the UN tour route. But our main work continued to be with young people in the classrooms. This is Reiko Yamada. She was a part of our project for many years, and she also worked with us when we brought students to this is the Theater for the New City in Manhattan. We would bring students together to listen to Hibakusha testimony and then work with playwrights to create a one-act play and then perform it in front of each other, all within a one-day workshop, which were incredibly moving and very successful. We also engaged students in the Japanese art form of kamishibai. This is a student that is making a kamishibai of Shigeko Sasomori's story. When Shigeko was 13 years old in Hiroshima, she pointed up to the sky and said to her friend, "Look at the airplane in the sky." And the next thing, she was knocked unconscious and was unrecognizable. She lay unattended for a number of days, waiting for her to be found by her parents. And she just kept finding the strength to say her name over and over, and the area where she lived in Hiroshima. And finally, somebody brought her parents there, and that's when she was rescued. This is a kamishibai from Yasuaki's story. He often would play in the countryside outside of Nagasaki, collecting dragonflies and cicadas. For whatever reason, on the morning of August 9th, he didn't go join his friends on the hillside, but was with his mother when the atomic bomb destroyed the city of Nagasaki. And she covered his body with her body saving him from the fire and the destruction that was around him. Here's Yasuaki and one of the students that we interacted with in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We also created animations, again, finding different ways to relate this story. This is the work of Amber Cooper Davies. She's an animator from London, and she worked together with a New York-based composer, Sam Sadigursky, to create this nuclear age in 6 movements. We also created another animation called If You Love This Planet, and that was based on Setsuko Thurlow's speech at the United Nations on July 7th, 2017, when the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons was adopted. In 2015, we created a concert called With Love to Hiroshima and Nagasaki for the 70th anniversary of the atomic bombings, using music, dance, and poetry. For this, we enlisted one of our collaborators, Clifton Truman Daniel. He's the eldest grandson of President Harry Truman. And through our Hibakusha Stories project, we were able to bring Setsuko and Yasuaki to the Little White House in Key West, Florida. And because of their great collaboration there, we do have Hibakusha testimony officially located at the Truman Library in Independence, Missouri. Here's Clifton and Shigeko during the concert. Here's Yasuaki speaking about the Shinron Shonin statue that is based in Riverside neighborhood of Manhattan on the Upper West Side. It was a gift from Hiroshima to New York City in 1955, the same year that the 25 Hiroshima maidens came for reconstructive surgery at Mount Sinai. Here's Setsuko with a banner that has the name of all of the classmates who perished on August 6th, 1945. And she often brings that to explain that these may look like names, but these to her are, her former friends. And she sort of created that promise that she would be able to bring them into different places so that people remember it's not just a number. As Setsuko would say, each person had a name. Each person was loved by someone. Also at the concert, we worked together with Jean Rowe, a local composer who's pictured here. Behind her is the Himawari Choir. They are a choir of Nagasaki Hibakusha who flew to New York for the occasion, and they created an anthem for nuclear guardianship with the high school choir from LaGuardia High School for the Performing Arts. And so it was a really precious moment for intergenerational learning. And in this moment, they were singing this beautiful libretto that Jean had composed, and they would say different messages from the future. This young man spoke this: "You remember, don't you, how you took her hand in yours under the clear April sky and taught her how to count on her fingers and toes? The hands that once destroyed are hands that can give." And then the Hibakusha would say the same in Japanese. It was an incredibly moving event that was performed at the New York Society for Ethical Culture. And that also carried a lot of meaning because Robert Oppenheimer's family were one of the founding families of the New York Society for Ethical Culture. So bringing our Hibakusha Stories project to that very venue felt kind of alchemical. Here we are at the Pioneer Works, which is an art institution in Red Hook, Brooklyn. And our project was able to bring the monumental works of Iri and Toshi Maruki called the Hiroshima panels. These are artworks that were created over years by Japanese artists who were also Hibakusha or related to Hibakusha. And they dedicated their entire working lives to creating these incredible panels. And so our project brought high school students to Pioneer Works to engage with the artwork and then write their responses to being in front of these works, which were witnesses to Hiroshima themselves. These works, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. There is one of the panels, one of the Maruki panels, that is dedicated to Nagasaki. So you can see the size, you can see the concentration that the students brought to this very special series of events and workshops that we did at Pioneer Works. We also brought hibaku ibutsu, that's like leftover remnants that were found in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in the ruins, in the charnel grounds. These were given to me by my friend Shimohira-san. And very special to that day was the fact that we had Setsuko and Yasuaki with us. So the students not only were able to engage with the artworks, but they were able to engage with the hibakusha themselves. Also at that time, we worked with Eiko Otake, who's a Japanese artist and dancer who lives in New York City, and she danced to the panels. And we made a short film out of that. And then we brought that to National Sawdust, which is a arts and music venue in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. Again, the students heard hibakusha testimony. And then to the short film with Eiko dancing, we had jazz musicians from New York. Here's Sam Sedigersky and Meg Okura improvising to the film that we made. This is Dan Tepfer, another New York-based jazz musician. And then Eiko came out to also present directly to the students. So I'm going to rush through here because I realize that I'm out of time. But we also helped create international law. Our interventions with Hibakusha at the UN definitely moved the needle on the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, for which our campaign, the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons, won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2017. Here's Robert Kronquist, the founder of Youth Arts New York Hibakusha Stories, holding our Nobel Peace Prize. Here's Setsuko having a small practice before delivering her speech. And we were also part of a project to bring this hibaku piano, a piano that survived the atomic bombing, to the Nobel Peace Prize concert. And you can see here John Legend playing that piano. And I'm going to close with just saying that what's so important about all of our work is making the abstract personal. So nuclear weapons aren't just an abstract thing sitting in a silo, being at this very moment monitored by human beings and computer systems that will eventually break, and humans that we all make mistakes. But the personal is that every moment of every day, everything and everyone that we love is threatened by the existence of nuclear weapons. So if we can stop looking at it from an abstraction and think about what we love and what we want to protect, is a way that we can carry this work forward. I'd just like to end with a quote, if I can find it, from Judith Butler, a great philosopher and theorist. Judith says, the best argument against violence is that when I do violence to another, I do it to myself because we are not separate. We are all interrelated. And that's just to close again with homage to my teacher, Joanna Macy, who talked about the greening of the self. We're not just like skin encapsulated egos. We're part of all life on earth. We are life working through this one human body to all of us that are connected with each other. So I hope that we can continue our work in the various ways that we make peace in the world by thinking about who and what we love and how we can protect them, and that we are all connected with one another. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. And our next speaker, Ray Matsumiya, is a peace builder and practitioner of unofficial diplomacy, whose work is inspired by his mother's roots in Hiroshima. He holds a master's degree from the Fletcher School at Tufts University and a BA from Wesleyan University. Over more than 25 years, he's designed and led cross-cultural peace programs implemented across the Middle East, North Africa, Japan, Europe, and the United States, in partnership with organizations including the U.S. Department of State and UNESCO. He's the founder of the Oleander Initiative, which brings global leaders to Hiroshima for immersive programs and study tours. And his work has been featured by outlets including the New York Times, PBS, and HK World. Please welcome.
Hey, thank you so much. My name is Ray Matsumiya. I'm the director of the Oleander Initiative, and I want to take you on a journey today. So we're going to start in Hiroshima with my grandfather, and that's going to lead into my peace-building work in the Middle East. And it's going to strangely bring me back to Hiroshima, and at the end, it's going to bring us back to this moment in history here in the United States, here at the University of Michigan. So I'm really happy to introduce you to my grandfather. This is Yoshio Chichioka. And on August 6, 1945, he lived in a small village outside of Hiroshima called Hira. And on that morning, people started running to his house saying that something horrible had happened in Hiroshima, the city that he loved. And my grandfather knew that he had to go because he was the captain of the volunteer fire department. So he gathered his men, he got in his fire truck, and he started going down the road from Hiro to Hiroshima. And you can see that it takes about 37 minutes to go from Hiro to Hiroshima. And I always wonder what he was thinking during those 37 minutes. Like, what did he think when he first went over that hill and he saw the mushroom cloud coming out of the city that he loved? What did he think when he arrived and he could feel the heat of the city that was completely scorched and destroyed? What did he think when he first started hearing the wails and cries of the kids that were hurt by this bomb? When he arrived, he saw complete devastation. More than 2/3 of all the buildings were destroyed. And just think of that. Think of where you live, your favorite coffee shop, your school that you went to school in 3rd grade. 2/3 of everything that you know is gone. Because what had happened was that a new bomb was deployed in Hiroshima. It harnessed the very power of the sun, and it unleashed it on the tiny, frail flesh and blood creatures of Hiroshima. And the core of the bomb was hotter than the sun. It bent metal, it bent glass, and one bank, every single coin in that bank was fused together. Think of how hot that has to be. On people, it had almost a superhuman effect, supernatural effect. It left people's clothing on patterns on their skin. People were vaporized. Only their shadows were left from this weapon. And you can see from these photographs in 1944 how densely populated Hiroshima was, look how close the houses were together. And this is what it looked like after the bomb struck. After a year, the conservative estimate is that over 140,000 people were killed. Over 345,000 people were impacted by the bomb. Either they got cancer later or they're affected in some way. And my grandfather was there for 3 days helping the wounded. And I just can't imagine what he saw or how he felt during those 3 days. And he went home to his family. About a week afterwards, he felt a strange pain in his left eye. And about a week after that, he lost it to the radiation that he was exposed to. But he never forgot what that eye had seen. And I think those images, those horrible things kept ricocheting through his mind for many, many years. And what came out afterwards is very, very surprising. Because until the day he died, he talked about his 3 lessons of Hiroshima, what he learned from his terrible experience. And the first was he really believed that human beings were made to be resilient. He saw how the people of Hiroshima somehow unified and rebuilt their city more beautiful than before. And he was absolutely convinced that we are made to face adversity and overcome it, that we're made to move forwards no matter what happens to us. His second lesson was to forgive but never forget. He eventually forgave the Americans, enough so that he let his daughter, my mother, move to Boston, and I'm an American. But he never forgot the horrors of nuclear war. And that brings me to his third lesson of Hiroshima, which is that he really thought he saw the end of the world in Hiroshima. And he realized that if this happens more and more often in future wars, this is the end of humanity. So he thought it was the duty of every single human being, whether it was me or you or anyone, to work towards peace, to make sure what happened to his city would never happen again. So he talked about these 3 lessons to my mother in Hiroshima, and then she eventually came to Boston, and she transferred these lessons to me. And ever since I was really small, like probably around the same age as my kid right now, who's 10 years old, my mother would tell me that I should work for peace. So I guess I was a good boy, and I did that. So I studied really, really hard. I did some internships. I graduated university from Wesleyan, and I was raring to go to work for peace. And do you know what I did? I actually ended up playing chess. But like sadly enough, even 25 years ago, it's hard to work for peace as it is right now. So I was pretty good at this game. And if you guys know on Harvard Square at all, there's a place there where all the chess hustlers of this area go, and we all play blitz chess. You play 5-minute games for $2 or $3 a game. And this is what I did all day long. Like for about a year, I played the King's Gambit, the King's Indian Attack, the Alekhines Defense. That was my world. And sometimes like just kind of fate smiles on you. And one day I was playing chess and I was winning, but I saw like a really, really beautiful woman watching my game. So naturally I lost my game so I could go talk to her. So I went over to her, I started talking, and it just happened that she was at Harvard University. And she was part of this amazing group of Middle Eastern students that had become great friends from their classes. And that became the basis of my organization, is that education can be a platform for peace. Sometimes you have like the right idea at the right place at the right time with the right people. And this is 1997, 1998. And this is when peace was breaking up all over the world. There's the Oslo process, there's the Good Friday Agreement. And our organization took off like a rocket ship. We got these beautiful offices on Canal Street in Boston within a few weeks. We raised $1 million within a couple of years. There's classes taught about us at Harvard and MIT. And in 1999, we ran our first program for Middle Eastern teachers. And that's when I really got bit by the peace bug. It's beautiful when you see peace, even on this micro level. And it was amazingly successful, so we expanded it in 2000. Oh, sorry. And we worked mostly with teachers. And the reason why we worked with teachers is because they have a tremendous multiplier effect. Each teacher has 200 or 300 students. So if you can pass on these conflict resolution methods onto these teachers, they have a huge potential for impact. They can single-handedly make a platform for peace in the Middle East if there's enough of them. So this is a very successful program. We expanded it in 2000, made it even bigger in 2001. And then things started happening. We had the Intifada, we had 9/11, the war in Iraq, and many, many things happened. But we didn't stop. We just kept going. We just kept running these programs year after year after year. We expanded into New York, to Washington, D.C., to Rhode Island. Internationally, we worked with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Spain. And we started doing programs in the region itself, in Beirut, in Egypt, in Jordan, in Morocco. We got a lot of notoriety for this. We were in NHK, New York Times, and others. We had some tremendous supporters, like His Grace Archbishop Desmond Tutu, the King of Morocco, and many others. During this time, we worked a lot with the State Department, and we worked on a lot of programs that brought teachers from America over to the Middle East and from the Middle East to America, and they worked together on conflict resolution methodologies. And we were really humming along. We had over 3,000 participants in over 60 programs. And then our funding was precipitously cut in 2013. There was a pivot in the State Department. And it was really hard for us. It was really hard for me. We went from 7 full-time staff members to 5 to 3. And then it was just kind of me being sad alone in my office. And then something amazing happened where I met this amazing funder named Bernard Otterman. And he suggested having a program in Hiroshima, Japan. So until then, we had programs in 8 different countries. And little did I know that our most successful program was going to be in Hiroshima. This is our first cohort in 2016. I think Kathleen is there. Is Kathleen? Yep, there she is, right on the left over there. And what was amazing about our Hiroshima program is that, in our other programs in Boston College or Spain or Beirut or anywhere else, we had about a 50% implementation rate, which means that people come to our programs and only about half of them are able to transmit what they learned to their schools and their communities. But in Hiroshima, the implementation rate was running at 80 to 100%. It was crazy. It was double what we usually do. And that's when we realized that there's something really special about the city of Hiroshima. Since then, we've had 14 different programs there. And we expanded it to cover other communities in conflict, like Northern Ireland. We also bring different universities and high schools and others there. And we really realized that Hiroshima is the ideal location for peace-building programs. So why is that? What is so special about this place? Well, I'm going to go back to my grandfather again. I really feel like a lot of the peace culture that is in Hiroshima comes from the survivors, the people that were directly impacted by the bomb. And you saw the lessons of Hiroshima that my grandfather had, and really his central wish was for us to all promote peace. And he's not alone. So many of them want the same thing. This is an article from Time magazine. You can see what some of the Hibakusha said. This is Ishida-san. He's a great friend of mine, and he's also a Hibakusha. And he talked about, he lost many people he loved in Hiroshima during that bomb. He grew up with many things that most people have that he couldn't have because the bomb took it away from him. And for many, many years, he burned with anger against the Americans. Every time he saw the Americans in the Jeep, he wanted to just strangle them. And he was burning with this anger. And then that changed when he was in his late 20s, early 30s, when he got married and he had a son. And he took that really fragile, beautiful being, and he put him, and he looked at him in his arms, and he said that at that time, the choice was so stark that he could either be stuck in the past, burning with this anger, or he could work towards the future to make sure that his son never experienced what he did. And if it became a stark choice like that, future or past, it was very easy. And he decided to work for the future. And currently, he's the director of the Honkawa Peace Museum. So you can see the message from the victims themselves is not anger at the United States. It's not victimhood or revenge. It's a worldwide message of peace. And this is something that I don't understand. Like, how could they take all that pain that they felt and somehow channel it outwards into this worldwide message of peace. It's still a mystery to me. You can see how quickly this message of peace took hold in Hiroshima. This is May 1946, less than a year after the bomb dropped. And you can see that the people of Hiroshima have erected a peace tower. It's not a tower of revenge or victimhood. It's a peace tower less than a year after the bomb dropped. The city itself decided to dedicate the reconstruction of Hiroshima to peace. They passed something called the Peace Memorial Reconstruction Act. And every single part of Hiroshima peace was considered as it is being rebuilt. In Hiroshima, peace is political power. Can you imagine that? These are 4 very famous mayors of Hiroshima, and they all won because of their platforms for peace. Peace is political power in Hiroshima. It's also a place that lives peace. So it's the only place outside of North America, and I think a town in Sweden, that makes MLK Day an official city holiday. It's also the only location of a Holocaust museum in East Asia, and it also has many tributes to Holocaust victims like Anne Frank. They want their citizens to live peacefully. So it's one of the only educational systems that legally mandates that every single level of education have a peace education component, all the way from kindergarten all the way to high school. And I just want to show you a quick example of this. This is from the Motomachi school, and this is their morning peace song. And I'm not quite sure how to play this. Do you know? Ah. I love the part about the insects and the animals. And there's really nothing cuter than a bunch of little Japanese kids singing about peace. So Hiroshima is an amazing place because it's an example of mainstream peace. Like no matter where you go, peace is present. So if you go there, you'll see that the main museum is the Peace Memorial Museum. The main park is the Peace Memorial Park. The main road that goes through Hiroshima is the Peace Boulevard. There's a peace bridge. There's 2 different peace clocks. There, peace has been commercialized. People make money off of peace. There's peace hotels and peace cafes. There's peace snacks and peace bathhouses. There's a peace bike share. There's even a 1-piece nail salon. I was just there a month ago, and these are 2 new peace products. There's peace nuts, and there's Hiroshima peace beer, which I enjoyed. So you can see why Hiroshima is a living embodiment of peace and optimism and resilience, because this is what Hiroshima looked like on August 6, 1945. And this is what Hiroshima looks like now. It's this beautiful, vibrant city that is just overflowing with peace. So I want to connect things back together, and I want to tell you how Hiroshima has affected some of our teachers in the Middle East. And during our program, we asked the teachers, what is the lesson of Hiroshima? The same things my grandfather is trying to transmit. And then how do you take that lesson of Hiroshima and how do you incorporate that into your teaching? And this is what they did. Well, one of the most obvious ones is the humanitarian impacts of nuclear weapons. And that is one of the most special things about Hiroshima is that, it's not an abstract. I mean, it's hard to comprehend the impacts of nuclear weapons, but you can when someone tells you about it. And that is something very powerful. And many of them have gone back to their homes and communities and transmitted this message. Others are a little bit more exotic, like the lesson of Hiroshima for this teacher was that she really took the idea that is the responsibility of every single human being to promote peace. So she wanted to empower her students to do that. So she made a peer mediation class to give the ability of every single one of her students to create peace in their own communities and classrooms. This is a very interesting teacher from Lebanon. He was so struck by this comic book manga called Barefoot Gen. And Barefoot Gen is about this orphan who loses his parents in the in the bomb. And it's all about resilience. And one of the main themes is wheat, right? Because if you step on wheat during the winter, the tougher it gets. And when it regrows in the spring, it is much stronger than not being trampled as before. And you can see why that message of resilience resonates so much in Lebanon, because this is Beirut after 1983 and 2006, and this is Beirut after they reconstructed it. So it's such a tangible connection between those two places. This teacher from Egypt was impressed by the unity that all of Hiroshima society had and how they resolved their own petty differences between them to unite to reform Hiroshima. And she brought that as a lesson plan to unite Christians and Muslims in her school. And one of the interesting things was that all the ministries of educations loved the Hiroshima content. So they actually actively supported a lot of the Hiroshima education. So they sponsored different train-the-trainer workshops. This is one in Casablanca. And there were 54 teachers that were trained by 2 alumni of our program. And you can see, if you think about multiplier effect, you can see how quickly the students add up from something like that. Most recently, we've had teachers and students from Lebanon. You know, as you know, there's been much violence in Lebanon over the last few years. And this is this amazing group that was able to make it to Hiroshima just like really weeks after the ceasefire was called last year. And you know, they ran to get their visas, and even on the way to Hiroshima, they missed their flight because there was rioting outside of the airport. So they came a day later, but they made it. And they had a program focused on resilience and rebuilding and peace. And that is something that really resonated in Lebanon, because when they went back, they were asked to be in 4 different news programs. So this message of Hiroshima was transmitted to thousands and thousands of Lebanese people. This happened just about a month ago. We brought another group of Lebanese students, and we purposely tried to select students that were in more affected areas of Lebanon. And it was such a powerful program because, you know, when they met the Hibakusha, usually the way these things go is that the Hibakusha transmits information to the audience because no one can replicate their experiences. But these kids, these victims of violence, they could interact with the Hibakusha on an equal level. They shared how it feels to not know what happened to a loved one, and they bonded on this amazing level. And you know, I talk about the lessons of Hiroshima, and you know, some of them are not applicable to them. You know, the violence is too fresh. They can't forgive. You know, it's too difficult for them. Some of them lost loved ones. Some of them, 2 of them lost their homes. But the thing that they really came away with was this idea of resilience, that they have to move forwards no matter what. So I want to conclude on this presentation by going over the 3 lessons of Hiroshima that my grandfather talked about, and the one that I think is most relevant to this moment in time right now. You know, I went to a lunch today with some of the students here, and many of them talked about how they felt so overwhelmed and hopeless with the state of our world. And I don't blame them. There's a lot of chaos out there, both in our country and outside. And I feel the same way. You know, I get through work, I hear these terrible news flashes coming in. I get disturbed by it, and I think about how it's going to impact my work, but I can hold out. I'm okay. But then I get home, and I see my wife, and I see her smile, and then I see my kid with his Red Sox hat. He loves the Red Sox. And I can't hold it together anymore. And I think about how I would feel if something happened to them. What would happen if something like Hiroshima happened in Boston? And that's when I freeze, and I get very still. And I feel the same way the students did. And at that time, that's when I think about my grandfather's lessons of Hiroshima, especially the first one, resilience. And I think we're in a time of history where resilience is needed more than ever. Crazy things are happening in the world, but you have to have resilience. You have to move forwards through adversity. You have to move forwards no matter what. And I think that is a lesson in Hiroshima that is the most relevant to us. So it is a message of hope, because if you don't have you don't have resilience unless you have hope and optimism, unless you know in your heart that at some point it's going to get better. You just have to make it there, and you'll see the opportunities for peace then. So that is my message. That is my grandfather's message to you, is to be resilient, be optimistic, be hopeful, move forwards no matter what. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ray. Professor Ram Mahalingam is a cultural psychologist, artist, and filmmaker whose work examines how caste, race, ethnicity, gender, and social class intersect to shape inequality and well-being. He developed the social justice focused mindfulness framework, Mindful Mindset, emphasizing dignity, and his current research focuses on nurturing compassionate leaders. He's director of the Barger Leadership Institute and the Barger Leadership Institute professor in the University of Michigan Department of Psychology, where he created undergraduate mindful leadership and global peace leadership programs that engage Hibakusha and Hiroshima peace activist narratives. An award-winning filmmaker, he also practices Sumi and has collaborated on the multimedia installation Being Brown in Michigan, Narratives of South Asians. Welcome.
Thank you very much for coming on the evening like this. I just want to thank you for all our guests who are here. It's such a pleasure and honor to have you all. I want to, we all talked about the movie. Some people couldn't come to see the movie last night. It's available on PBS. It's free for 2 more years, right? Which is right. 2 more years you can watch the movie in PBS. So I want to, in my presentation, is following Ray's, what in the space we do as teachers, what we can do. He was teaching teachers, and I'm going to talk about, as a teacher, what I did, what I'm doing right now. So I'm at Barger Leadership Institute, which is a leadership institute dedicated for undergraduate leadership development. It has a history. Leadership is the frontline connectivity. It's about being plugged into the customer, the culture, the government, and being a visionary. What is exciting to me about this program is that it is directed at undergraduates. Leadership usually is wrapped into a program well down the career path at graduate school. The institute, we will give undergraduates the ability to grab leadership concepts early. They will have experience painting the picture. This is one of the founders, Dave Barger, is also here. His vision, that was the founding vision of BLI. So we believe that leadership is learned. It includes service to others and a commitment to preserve dignity. It occurs at all levels. It is relational, it's social, situational, and cultural. It is also developmental. It's also a lifelong learning process. So we try to instill these values. We work very hard in setting these things. So institutionally, what we do as an institute, we are actually focusing on 3 things. Mindful mindset, which is the mindfulness part of it. As a leader, how you're going to learn these things. And leadership habits, how you're going to interact with the world, right? So where the real leaders, we got example from real leaders, what kind of habits good leaders have, and also how we should think about the big questions. What are the big questions of our time, and both at the social level here and at the global level. So the mindful mindset has about 7 features. It talks about compassion, how you have compassion for other people. Also, you have sympathetic joy, how you rejoice with other people's happiness, and how we have our own imperfections. We are not always perfect as leaders, have negative capability like an actor. So you can actually work with your imperfections with compassion. You also think of your identity as always changing. It is not strictly in one place. It is situational. It has its own privileges and disadvantages, but it also helps us to connect to people. Then idea of wonder, how it's a transformational passion, how to think about changing the world. Like an artist, you look at these things with a new eye. And with cultural humility, you approach any community. So that's important. Then you also notice the generosities around us, how many people's generosity is involved in making our life. So I call it a banyan tree minds, like you have a janitor, like a compassionate person, like a cook who is happy for when people eat their food, they are so genuinely happy. And you have an actor like a negative capability. It's like Keats' idea, right? Then you have the potter's mind. When you actually do something, every firing you get a new one, right? Until you get the pottery, until firing is done, you don't know what you're going to get, right? Then that's with the cultural humility approach. As an artist, you also wonder about things. And as a weaver's, like having a weaver's mind is the gardener's mind. Weaver's mind is how you view your identities in a situational way, right? As a gardener who actually generous to us because they build the whole things for us, not for their own happiness. These are the leadership habits we teach our students. So this is our foundations. So with these foundations, we actually have 5 leadership programs, applied leadership fellows who actually run our day-to-day programming of the center. Uh, Leadership teaching fellows, all our courses are peer taught by the students. We teach undergraduates how to become teachers. So social transformation fellows who actually do projects to change the system, whatever the thing they really wants to be changed. Then mindful leadership fellows, I take them for 3 days to a retreat, and actually they learn all these things and how not to use their cell phones when they're attending a lecture, those sort of things, small things we teach them. Then the Global Peace Leadership Fellows, that's what I'm going to talk about because that is relevant to the Hiroshima project, right? So all our programs for our training undergraduate students. So Mindful Global Peace Leadership, that's the course I teach. It's a 3-credit course. Students involved go to Japan. We go to Hikone. That's where Japanese Center for Michigan Universities, JCMU. They host our program. So during the 3 weeks, it's a very intense residential program to some sense. Students learn mindfulness meditations. They also learn contemplative art, including sommelier. They actually go to a studio. They actually work with an artist. Then do a lot of journaling, poetry writing, so which you'll see along the way how they do that. So basically 3 streams they work. They learn mindfulness. They also learn leadership theories, peace leadership theories, and they're also experiential learning. That's where Hiroshima comes. So that really leads to the phenomenological sense of what means to be a leader. What it means to be a leader? What is the phenomenological sense? How to help them to construct that, right? One thing to talk about theories all the time, like Kathleen was talking about, actually what you're going to do, how you're actually going to do that part, right? So they also learn how to look at the Japanese aesthetics, like 3 things. 3 things I focus: wabi-sabi, the notion of impoverished beauty, how imperfection can be important. There is an aesthetic quality to this, because being perfect is a very high-pressure situation. University like Michigan, everybody wants to be perfect. So everybody thinks other people are perfect than me. So how it leads to them. One unaware the idea that there's a transient beauty, things are changing, and there is a transient, how you pay attention to this. The idea of Ma in a tea ceremony, how your relationship with the space and time. So they go through all these practices, they learn about this, they go to a tea ceremony, all those things, right? Then we take them to Hiroshima. So Hiroshima, we actually go to Hiroshima, we stay at World Friendship Center. It was started by Barbara Reynolds, the Quaker. The center has a program. If you stay there, the night you stay, next day morning, they bring a Hibakusha who are in their 70s or early 80s. They come and tell their story, what happened to them. It's a very powerful story. Kathleen has so much experience doing that. She has shown how it is making impact, how it is race work is also showing, how it is making an impact on teachers. So the Hibakusha narratives, so they really come and talk to their students. The stories are powerful. So they listen to the stories, and students did a reflective journal, what happened that day after that. So he had a quiet demeanor. This is Sohari-san's life story. He's in his 80s. He talks about his life, what happened to him, his friends, family. He had a quiet demeanor, one that parallels the nature of an ocean. There are parts of the ocean that are very calm on top, and underneath there is all this activity, all this depth. So basically, the story really moved the way how we think about this person. So the stories are important, not just abstract. Peace is not abstract. Suffering is not abstract. It is real. It is situational. It is really comes with this. So he also did a drawing about Horizon, told of his sister protecting him from the bomb's impact. So she took one aspect and she did a whole series of drawings on this. She wrote of how his family members died. Their father died 6 days after the attack. Their mother had breast cancer at age 60, but lived to 83. His sister died of colon cancer at the age of 55. Horizon was one of many in Hiroshima to develop cancer. His was a lymphomania in 2011, and he still goes to the doctor every 3 months. He actually met his wife in World Friendship Center where they were trying to learn English class. That's where he met. So a lot of people, some people meet at the chess players, and some people meet important people in their life. So that's important. So these are the Samantha's drawings. It's a very powerful work she did. Then after the Hibakusha narrative, so I also did another intervention. It is a famous Hisashi Inoue's play, The Face of Jiso. It's a famous play. It's called Living with Father. It's a 4-act play. It happens in Hiroshima. It's also it's a very nice film. It's also our library has it. It's called Living with Father. It's the name of the play. The play tells a story. It's basically a series of conversations between a father and daughter. The play starts slowly, as if the father is, if the daughter comes back from her library. He's a librarian. She comes back from library work, and he was nagging why she's not dating anybody. Usual question: when are you going to get married? Kind of a question, right? Slowly, you understand by second or third act, you realize this is happening in Hiroshima. He was a Hibakusha, and what happened to her. It really gets deeper into Hibakusha life, survivor guilt, range of how the people live, how they don't talk about it. When they talk about it, how it affects them. Whether they want to get married, what are the dilemmas they face. So being Inoue is one of the most well-known playwright. It's a very powerful play. So what we found was, Amona's son, Tatsuji Amona's son, who used to be a cab driver. He actually accidentally read the play in a store, a second-hand bookstore. Then he learned acting. He's from Nagoya. He learned Hiroshima dialect. As a one-man act, he plays both father and daughter. It's a very powerful performance of 86 minutes. He has slides. He really, you can hear the whole thing. And slowly, really, students understand how profoundly that particular day affected, what decisions people made on that day, who is going to survive, who is escaping the house. The father is actually a ghost. You actually realize that in the last act. So the play has a very powerful impact on students. They talk about how they understand. So we had both back to back, the Hibakusha narrative, then the play, right? It was about 86 minutes. So they really understand in a different way, even though it's a poetic way of talking about suffering because it's a playwright. They have certain luxuries. It really touched them how to think about life, how to think about their own, how they're going to think about their own commitment to peace, which is a main message Ray and all our intervention talks about. So the final project, I asked them to design a mindful peace organization. If you are going to lead an organization, what will that be? So what kind of parameters you will use to define your organization? So you need to develop a vision for it, what I call the Mindful Dignity Peace Organization. You can design it for any context. It could be a local, it could be any community or international, whatever you want to do with this. So these are the, before doing this, to really help them to get some inspiration, each student has to present one Peace Nobel laureate's life story. Who won it, why they won it, what are the things, how they actually went through the suffering, the resilience part, how they didn't think that they are going to get the Peace Nobel Prize. None of them ever thought about it, and they all presented the work. Then they all designed a mindful peace leader, a vision for it. They come up with a mission statement, vision statement, and they are going to promote three things: dignity, peace, and well-being. And they all define these three terms in their own way. Each student have to design it, talk about it phenomenologically, all the things they did with using poem, poetry, writing, contemplative art, everything. And they also make a commitment to reduce two things: precarious work, all the gig economy. Everybody is doing 2 jobs, 3 jobs to make a living, and invisibility. So how to make certain things that are invisible visible in our organization? How to recognize the humanity and dignity of fellow human beings? How you're going to operationalize it as a leader, as a mindful leader, and how they're going to do this. So they all did some amazing projects. We took 10 students. It was, I'm going to, in the final project they did, they chose a community where conflict is brewing, or during a conflict or post-conflict, how you're going to do this. So you can actually do peace in any of these places wherever you can, how you think about these questions. And so I'm going to end with 2 poems student wrote the final project. The one poem is, "To breathe is to remember that I'm not separate, that roots beneath pavement still touch my feet. To walk with care is to live in peace, a peace that grows quietly in kitchens, in conversations, in the shadows of unseen kindness." This is Felix. It is drawing with this. This is Lydia's poem, "Two Suns." There were 2 suns in the sky, one for each corner of the child's scribbled page, both a blinded emittance of light. Hues of yellow and orange painted across the sky, one a God-given gift, worshipped by generations for its warmth and light, a permanent companion to life. The other, precariously shaped, a new ray of light, occupying a temporary space, something man-made, something destroying the life. The other let create. The sun never set, but left in a toxic, foggy haze, a simmerance of pain, a wretched grave. There were 2 suns that day. What horrifying praise. So that was her poems. So all these things, when I talk about, are also important for us to think about. It's the ecosystem, and a village we developed in BLI to help students to develop. These are my staff. Nadia is here, Nadia Reeves, Miriam Roth, Shia, anchors, Fatima Haq, Beth Kentoth, Christina Ekoff, Makita Turner, and Mary Schlitt is also somewhere sitting here. So all these people are here. They are my miracle workers, make this happen. So there's a village is involved in making all this happen. So we work very hard to really build a beloved community, the way we think about it, a community in which people of different backgrounds recognize that we are all interconnected and that our individual well-being is inextricably linked to the well-being of others. In 1956, MLK was talking where white supremacists were trying to kill him. So it has a lot of courage to talk about it. So thank you for coming in the evening. Appreciate it, and we will take questions. Thank you.
Over. I'll just say that. I'll just move over. Okay, well, this next, sure. Okay, I hope everyone's mic is on. Questions from the audience, thoughts? And if I don't see you, please wave, please.
You can use the mic too.
Thank you for the presentations, which were very interesting. And the reason I came today is that I saw this program about the horrors of nuclear war. And at the same time, I'm reading articles in the Michigan Daily about how the University of Michigan is embarking on a collaboration with Los Alamos National Laboratory to build a data center. They've already bought 125 acres of land. And in the Michigan Daily, they said it's explicitly for using computational power to enhance nuclear weapons. And I'm just wondering, at the same time, Pete Hegseth wants to send military people here for training because he doesn't think it's good enough on the East Coast. So this came up during the Vietnam War. I was an undergrad, and the university was doing weapons research. The students were just really upset about it and forced the university to divest part of its one institution that was involved in weapons research. So I'm just wondering how the Leadership Institute might be able to focus on that, to create awareness among the students now that it's a dangerous, I think it's a dangerous step on the part of the university to get involved in Pentagon research like that, accepting $1.25 billion to do it. Is there going to be, once you get started doing that, you're on the hook, and it could last a long time and cause a lot of worldwide damage, as we're seeing going on right now with our weapons already. So anyway, that's my thought. And I'd like to know your thoughts.
We haven't talked about these things, and I think it's important to raise awareness, and we will consider this. That's all I can say right now.
I met with a group of students this afternoon who are working on this. So there is a group of students here at U of M that are aware of this. It's actually a class. Is Craig here?
Just left a while.
Okay. Oh, do you want to say something? You were at the meeting.
I mean, my name is Greg Krupa, and I graduated in '78. I was editor of the Daily, and I'm back as sort of a political activist after a 40-year career at newspapers and magazines. And there are student groups, and there are employees of the university and faculty of the university working on this issue. There are people in Ypsilanti working on this issue. And have been since the summertime. Ypsilanti Township supervisors have recently expressed concern that if they build this, that will allow this thing to be built, that they will be targeted in warfare, which why they're not concerned about the targeting of others is I'll leave to you. But there are signal chat rooms set up for all of this. You can get involved in that way. And I think Peace Action Michigan, I'm member of the board of directors. We've been writing letters to the regents about it. You can appear at regents meetings to say this stuff shouldn't be going on. The puzzling thing to me, and I don't know if it's a generational divide, I don't mean to be ageist in any way, but people keep calling this thing in Ypsilanti Township a data center. And the university has started some irrelevant debate about, no, it's not a data center, it's a computational reception center or some freaking thing. It's a nuclear weapons research center in partnership with the Los Alamos National Laboratory. And as you said about Hegseth saying he wants to bring more military stuff, it's already paying dividends for the university in this fascist, militarist administration in which we are involved. Not that it's that much worse than the Democrats, but you know what I'm trying to tell you. So I'm a little puzzled as to why there's not more noise about this being a nuclear weapons research facility as opposed to a simple data center. And we need to be worried that they're going to take the electricity, they're going to take our water, they're putting it in communities of color, underprivileged communities, instead of like where the white folks live. Those are all issues, and nuclear weapons seem subservient to that, and I don't quite understand why. If you're on Signal, you can go to some of these chat rooms, though. People who are involved in this are the GEO people, the Graduate Employees Organization. Career Coalition people are involved in this. Other people are involved in it, and they're trying to resist. There are often meetings on Sunday afternoons at, I believe, 2 p.m. in Ypsilanti. I can show you one of those.
Thanks for sharing that information.
I hope you can share contact details with each other.
Mhm. Are there questions about this evening, what you've heard this evening, images, experiences, stories, or even reactions, please?
I want to thank all the presenters tonight for their insights. I learned a lot. I was invited by Ram tonight, so I'm really happy to have heard a little bit about what all of you have been working on. I'm a UMich employee, and before joining UMich, I was with USAID, U.S. Agency for International Development, working as an education officer in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So a lot of the work that I was doing was related to education programs that were meant to, for example, protect children from becoming child soldiers in conflict regions. You know, I visited camps for internally displaced people who were displaced by war. I saw some of the effects, met some of the community members, and it's just a powerful experience to, really meet people on the ground. And it's really difficult, I think, sometimes to, when you're here in the United States, you have a significant amount of psychological distance from what's going on in the world. I'm not sure I have a particular question for you, but I guess my question is related to how do you bridge that gap in understanding? What are things that you've found helpful in peace education to help people understand the realities? I really appreciated the pictures, for example, that you shared tonight, and sort of the stories behind the pictures. But what are some things, techniques that you've found to make it accessible and realistic especially for the young people on campus now, to understand how they can engage with the world and be a force of peace for others?
Thank you. Would you like to take that?
I think to answer that question, you have to look at the power of storytelling. And I think that is one of the main reasons to go to Hiroshima, is that, when you think about nuclear weapons, you think about the end of the world, it's such an abstract, crazy thing. You can barely grasp it. But when you meet someone that is actually a victim of the bomb, and they tell you face to face in front of you what happened, then all those things become much more tangible. And those are and that's something that connects, this very abstract thing to something that's very real. And I think that is one of the main powers of going to Hiroshima. And I think it's more important to go now than ever before, because the average age is like 86. Is that correct?
Right.
86 or 80. So they're all going to be gone in about 10 years. And that's why it's so important to listen from their own voice and make that connection between something abstract and something very real.
Thank you. Any other questions? Excuse me, please.
I know that there are a lot of plays around here in Chelsea with the Purple Rose, and plays elsewhere around here have a lot of strife, or they have a lot of fun, just silly things. Are there known plays that focus on peace, where people at the end of the day don't kill each other, but they find peace, or take that on as their career or their ambition for their futures?
Um, there is a not. I don't know about Purple Rose Theater what they are doing, but they have a rich program. But there's also effort to really bring Benjamin Lay, who is a Quaker abolitionist in the early 18th century, and there is a play, and the play is talking about peace and at a time before early history of the abolition movement, how Quakers even owned slaves that time in East Coast. That play is going on the round now, and it's really important reading. There's a new book on that, on his life. People know him, but actually now there is a play and there is a animation. So these sort of things, there are efforts like that, bringing peace and how to think about these questions. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. My name is Brian. I work with students who want to study abroad at Michigan, and I was there watching the documentary yesterday. I really actually was impressed with the connection to the Christian church in the documentary, and that's something I didn't realize. And about 30 years ago, I had the opportunity, the really wonderful opportunity of working at American University in Washington, D.C. And I was an advisor for the International Peace and Conflict Resolution Program there. And I worked with Dr. Abdul Aziz Saeed, who's a giant in that field. And he used to talk to me a lot about, that peace is not just the absence of violence, but it is the presence of cooperation. And it just kind of yesterday, kind of in this documentary, kind of having that insight of the fact that this interplay of faith, of Buddhism and Christianity and other religions. I just wonder your take too on this, because I often wonder, I don't see maybe, and this is just something maybe in my own little part of the world, but I don't see this cooperation among faiths and in peace. And I just wonder how we can see this more often, because I think this dialogue between faiths is so important. Dr. Abdulaziz Saeed always talked about it, but I wonder your take on this issue.
Interfaith.
Should I take that
Yep,
one?
yep,
Okay.
yep.
Well, one of the initiatives here at the university that was mentioned earlier is religious, spiritual, secular life that is very new and rolling out. And we have a group called ARC, the Association of Religious Counselors. There may be people here who are familiar with that. And they're not necessarily university employees, but they're really part of the periphery community of the university, but very much engaged with students who want to live their faith or connect in a spiritual sense. Some of the things that we are working on, it was formerly called Interfaith Youth Conference. Now it's called Interfaith America. And there are several other organizations that we are working to build out to create space, really, for dialogue, for conversation, even raising awareness of different faiths, but also acknowledging that there's so much we don't know, right? And so much oftentimes, even the academic calendar, many often are oriented to Christian faith traditions. And there are many others that often people are just not aware how it conflicts with a class, how it might affect a student when they want to live out their faith and they have a responsibility for an assignment. I say that because the university also rolled out this academic year policy. It is now a policy, not a letter alone, from the provost office that is raising awareness that it is a requirement for religious accommodations in the classroom, to raise awareness, to figure out what is the path forward, knowing there's many disciplines, different modalities of what a class looks like. It could be a lab, it could be a clinical, it could be a performance or an actual in-classroom experience, but how will we work to accommodate those students? Any others?
I'm involved with some peace groups, and one of them is used to be called the Meta Peace alcohol mobilized brain. We actually had 25 veterans in the Afghan war to save lives. So that change. Change. One thing that we do with the members groups, we do things like escorting farmers in the West Bank to their fields, school children in the West Bank to their fields. We will be keeping the peace at the State House on Saturday at the No Cake State, that sort of thing. We train nonviolence intervention, bystander intervention skills, unarmed civil protection, those sorts of things. And we always talk about centering ourselves first, making sure that the inner peace is present before we go make it. And I wonder to what extent the survivors of Hiroshima, they do the same thing. They're doing all this peace work in the great city. And to what extent is that sort of first? And do you have any examples of that that I can take to my colleagues?
Would you like to?
Okay. Thank you. Is my microphone on? That's a very eye-opening question. I think in the case of Japanese, whether that's Hiroshima, Nagasaki, or any other catastrophic disaster that have taken place, I think people really seek out to be in the nature. And as a part of Japanese culture, being in the nature, being a part of the nature really creates serenity. And I think that kind of supersedes the different faith groups. And I think that's the connector.
Right. On top of it, like Ray was talking, peace education is integrated all over in all the curriculum. And we don't have that. In the 80s, we used to have a lot of courses on peace education, history of nonviolence, Martin Luther King and Gandhi, things like that. Now, all those courses are migrated to conflict between India and Pakistan. So we really focus on the political processes, not on the peace processes. That's an interesting shift in the higher education. There are a few courses taught in peace, including my course, but typically we don't have an academic space like we used to have in the 70s and 80s to really think about nonviolence. Almost all universities taught a course on Gandhi. Now you rarely see anybody teaching a course on Gandhi unless you're taking a course on India or something.
I would just say, though, I mean, there's not a monolith. I think that when we talk about Hibakusha, there are some Hibakusha who are absolutely full of forgiveness and, want to be coming from a place of that. There are others who are absolutely full of anger.
Yeah.
And I really don't want people to leave this evening thinking that, there's a bunch of peace-loving people in Japan. Yes, there are, but everybody also had their own individual experience and their own individual response. If you saw the film last night, you can appreciate that Setsuko, while she is a very forgiving person, she also found a lot of motivation through this is unjust, so I'm going to respond from that place. Also, I mean, I would say with all due respect to the Japanese educational system, it's a very patriarchal society. So there is, at least in my experience, not as much respect for women in leadership. That's why it's very depressing for us who are feminists to see that the first Japanese prime minister that is a woman would be so right-wing. I mean, I don't mean to get into too many controversies here, but it's important that we recognize that this is not a monolithic kind of situation.
Good point. Do we still have
One
time?
more question.
One
Take
more.
one more.
One more question in the very back. It helps you might not need it, but we might.
Looking at peace movements in the United States with, say, the civil rights movement, peace equality movements that bring about peace and equality, and say the development of a culture of peace in Japan, in the areas that suffered from atomic bomb attacks. Using those examples, can any of you envision what a peace movement in the United States looks like in our current moment, where we have academic censorship? The same people who read the book that says blessed are the peacemakers also now say that empathy is a sin. Where there's all of these lines of division, just using maybe these other examples or your own examples of how maybe grassroots movements or similar peace movements have developed in other places. Just something that, how can we go about it now outside of classrooms, outside of churches, maybe even? What does a community-focused grassroots peace movement look like to each of you, based on your own past experiences and maybe what you would like to see going forward?
I mean, I feel like a lot of times it takes a crisis or something that is so outrageous that brings people together. Like in the example of Japan, it wasn't until those fishermen were irradiated by the Bikini Island testing that people got so angry that they were willing to go out and sign millions of signatures and go out in the streets and protest. I think because of our current political situation, it's difficult for people to do that. But I think that outrage is building and it's coming. And I'm not sure exactly what the catalyst is going to be, but I'm pretty sure it's going to happen soon. And I think that will be the thing that'll really kind of unite all of us and really work towards peace.
I think what scares me personally is Emmett Till was a massive catalyst for civil rights. Just that he was photographed, that he had a funeral in church in Chicago, like that. He was photographed in his coffin, historic. We now have body cam coming out where a person says, "Hey, I'm not mad at you. She's dead, less than 5 minutes." We have someone else who's a nurse who's helping people off the ground or executed. And it's maybe I'm just commiserating, but it's scary to imagine, like, what is that catalyst? And then when we're seeing typically not minoritized people who are queer, Rachel Beck was queer, but otherwise a white male get let down in the street. So I'm just like, what that catalyst. But I agree with you that it's a little hard not to be overwhelmed by.
Well, I think we're clearly in a poly crisis, I mean, if it's not coming from the military industrial complex or the climate chaos, who knows what we're going to be seeing this summer if farmers don't get their fertilizer. We could be looking at a food crisis in our own country. And I think that what it comes down to is, and I would just love to borrow from my beloved teacher, Dr. Joanna Macy. She talks about us being in the process of what she calls the great turning. We're turning away from an industrial growth society to a life-sustaining society. And, we don't know how it's going to end up, but, we're on this adventure of what she also calls the great unraveling. We're like in it. So instead of looking at these like big tent opportunities, be with where your passion is, what issue that you really want to grab a hold of, and find your community around that. And we all work towards this turning to a life-sustaining society. And yeah, we don't know how it's going to end. But we do know that we're part of a historical moment in our country. And I think that it's, I don't know, poetic justice may be putting it far too mildly, but this is the 250th anniversary of the birth of a nation that was born to genocide of indigenous peoples, also enslaved peoples that on whose back this country was built. But we are in a moment to reflect and resist, because we're in danger of losing our democracy. You know, I mean, I think that that's pretty clear to people that are paying attention. But there is a growing movement of people who are fed up, and there is a big demonstration coming up this Saturday across our nation. I think we're going to see it be even top the 7 million that came out to the second No Kings Day. And those remain to be nonviolent gatherings. And I think that's where we can go back to your great example of Dr. King and the civil rights movement, that we will win when we act nonviolently, when we act from love, and when we find the beloved community, as Ram reflected on. And I think that Anand Jyotihadas, who's a great journalist who writes on the Ink on Substack, said something along the lines of, what we're seeing is a war against the future, but we're the future and we can win. I mean, I don't mean to put it in this kind of, you know, militarized language, but I think we're involved in something that is emerging, and that those of us who are part of a community of loving neighbors and wanting to continue on this great experiment of democracy in our country, you know, I do believe that there's more of us well-intentioned, loving people in our country than those who want to militarize the voting system, that those that want to line the pockets of billionaires, that those that want to develop nuclear weapons and data centers. You know, I think that may you live in interesting times, I don't know. But I feel that change is coming and there's more loving, beautiful humans in our country than not. We just need to wrest the power back.
Okay, I think we can.
Thank you very much for spending time with us. And thank you to the panel. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thanks for staying late, and so we ran out a little bit of the time. Thank you.